So on the big HBO super flyweight card, also being featured in addition to the main event, Roman Gonzalez versus Srisaket Saranga Side 2, is Juan Francisco Estrada versus Carlos Cuadras for the WBC #1 contendership. Basically, winner of this fight becomes the mandatory for the winner of the main event, Gonzalez versus Wangek. A really good fight. This is honestly, to me, the fight of the night between these two. It's a fresh matchup for one, as opposed to Gonzalez and Sisek had fought before, and as opposed to Naoya Inoue's pro debut, his U.S. debut, versus Antonio Nieves, where a lot of people are definitely looking to see exactly what Inoue is going to have to show off stateside, since all of his previous fights were in Japan. Estrada and Cuadras is a fresh matchup between two top-level guys, between two guys who arguably defeated Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. I have never necessarily really argued too hard against the people that had either of them winning against Gonzalez. I think that people have every right to believe that, to argue for that. I'm a person that had both of those fights draws for Gonzalez, and not for that's not to even denigrate Gonzalez's accomplishments, and obviously me. I mean, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you know that I still think and have thought for a few years now that Gonzalez was the top pound for pound guy. And I still think so. People just they're very quick or very fickle and want to start just replacing people and replacing names and dropping people off, and it's insanity as far as I'm concerned. If you actually just look at the actual details, Gonzalez is a top level guy, and Estrada and Cuadras both, in terms of skill sets, at the very least, are high level fighters as well. And at initially higher weights for Estrada, and definitely a higher weight in Cuadras than Chocolatito. But in any case, Estrada versus Cuadras is an excellent fight. I'm really looking forward to it. Cuadras, of course, I definitely give him the edge in terms of hand speed, in terms of foot speed, in terms of even stamina. Just the work rate that he showed against Chocolatito. That was the fight where Cuadras actually was first really pushed, I think. Most of other Cuadras fights, I actually expected him to be a bit more of a spoiler against Gonzalez, because that's kind of what he's done against most of his opponents. He just kind of utilized his speed, his hand speed, his foot speed, in order to just kind of outpace a lot of his opponents, or eventually TKO him late. But generally, he was a lot more of like kind of a spoiling, kind of defensive fighter. Against Gonzalez, though, he went in there and he really went for the gusto. He was going in there trying to do damage, in addition to utilizing his normal kind of stick and move, flurry and move, combo and move style. And that's as opposed to Juan Francisco Estrada, who's a lot more of like a guy that kind of places his punches. He's a lot more of a technical Juan Manuel Marquez or Rafael Marquez-esque fighter. It's no wonder why Juan Manuel Marquez, thinks so highly of him. He's said it repeatedly in various news outlets and on the show that he hosts for ESPN, for instance, Golpe a Golpe, that Estrada is, his favorite fighter and the best fighter in Mexico, and I pretty much agree with him. I think that boxing-wise, technically speaking, Estrada is at the very top. He's at least skill set-wise, he is one of the best fighters in the sport of boxing. Period. Pound for pound, or however you want to say it, he's one of the best. That's just what it is. Really, what's mainly harmed him in terms of, I guess, if you want to start ranking these guys pound for pound, top 10, top 15, top 20, whatever, the main thing that's harmed Estrada is basically the hand injuries, as well as the kind of layoffs that he's had the last couple of years since he vacated the dual flyweight belts that he managed to defeat Brian Valoria for. Up until that point, he had done some very, very impressive work at flyweight, and then even as a light flyweight against Gonzalez, and actually even as a super flyweight before. He had had a couple of fights against some high-level super flyweight guys that he managed to pull through in. The two losses that he has, actually one of those he did avenge. It was against Juan Carlos Sanchez. He was actually one of the guys I was thinking of with regard to super flyweight matchups. Juan Carlos Sanchez, who actually gave a hell of a fight to Zolani Tete, who's actually another one of the guys that's a top-level fighter, a top-tier fighter, just really an elite fighter for the weight range, not even just the weight class, but the weight range. He's a guy at 118, however. Used to be at 115, but now he's at 118. But he managed to avenge that loss. The only other loss, of course, is to Chocolatito. One that's somewhat controversial in a lot of people's respects. Same for Cuadras. The only loss that he has is the one, the Chocolatito, and then he has a draw from a fight a while back. But the way that these two match up is just really interesting. Because I could see this going a number of different ways. I could see Cuadras kind of doing almost like a Roy Jones to Estrada's Hopkins, or to Estrada's Tony, in just being too quick, just being a little bit too fast to pull the trigger, and be able to kind of get in and get out, and get his punches off, and basically make it so that his agility and his athleticism, his kind of raw talent, is the thing that tells the tale of the fight. Whereas with Estrada, he's gonna definitely have to utilize smart movement, both on the back foot and the front foot. Can fight both ways, and be able to kind of cut off the ring, be able to kind of meet Cuadras in Cuadras's escape routes, and be able to hit him with combos as he does it. I definitely think there's going to be a lot of combinations thrown in this fight, because Estrada's always looking to counter with combinations. Cuadras is kind of looking to do the same. He'll throw a lot of feints in there. He's a little bit more of a jittery fighter, whereas Estrada tends to be, like Marquez, a little bit more like that kind of setup. He's kind of in a rhythm, almost like in a dance. He's like just in a rhythm. Like you almost where you see some of these fighters when they're shadow boxing. It's like Estrada's kind of general stance is kind of that there's like a slight degree of movement to him, almost as though he's kind of shadow boxing, getting ready to just ratchet off the next combination or the next counter punch, whether it's left hooks over the top, counter hooks to the body, hook to the head, uppercuts, etc. He pretty much has every punch in the book. Cuadras somewhat does too, albeit they come just from more awkward angles, from just kind of randomly kind of sporadic improvisational angles, whereas Estrada tends to be a lot more like where he's kind of banged on the craft so long that he has almost kind of like the rehearsed combinations, and then he can improvise within the structure of the style that he proposes. But he also, everything is very clean, everything is very sharp, very tight. Cuadras, he can get a little bit wild in there at times, which could potentially leave him open and possibly open him up to some of Estrada's tighter shots. But the speed of Cuadras may be the thing that makes the difference, where even though Cuadras' style can be a bit risky, there are some openings where a fighter could, theoretically hit him. If you look at Roy Jones, once he slowed down, there were openings that several fighters, Antonio Tarver most bombastically, took advantage of, where he was kind of pulling back with his hands low after a hook that he even landed actually on Tarver. And there's a possibility that Estrada could somewhat catch Cuadras in some of those moments, where Cuadras is kind of posing and kind of pulling off the cutie type moves that that's a term, if you don't know. A cutie is a term for like a boxer that's trying to swim without getting wet. That's trying to go in there and hit you and be like real quick in and out, and basically make it so that you have to completely reset your offense in order to try and actually even just make contact with him. Not even hit him cleanly, but just to even be able to make contact. Cuadras is that type of fighter. He's trying to just completely throw you off your game, make you reset, never allow you to get into a rhythm. Estrada is a fighter that he really flourishes when he gets into a rhythm, because once he's in that rhythm, like a Tony, like a Hopkins, etc. He can pretty much he can throw combinations throwing away, just and they'll come in just endless streams, and come with just really, really good accuracy and sharpness. So in light of that, I do think that Estrada is the slightly superior technical boxer, and that at the moment gives him the edge for who I actually favor to win this fight. But the thing about it is, will the hand issues crop up again? If Estrada winds up busting his hands on Cuadras and in the middle of the fight, he could be in serious trouble, because Cuadras is a guy that he's going to be there from the first round to the 12th round. He's going to be ready to fight. He proved that against Chocolatito when he was in there against it, under high pressure, high volume assaults from Gonzalez. He was able to handle it and fire back, with serious venom, and you could see that on Gonzalez's face. Venom is probably the most appropriate word for it, because of how swollen Gonzalez's face was after that fight. The physicality of Cuadras may wind up being the difference in the fight. Almost not unlike the first fight between Suisa Sorongavasai and Roman Gonzalez, where in those early rounds, Gonzalez was almost somewhat shocked by the physicality of Suisa, just because he had never fought anybody that was just that physical before. Estrada, I don't think, outside of Gonzalez, has really fought anybody that's this physical in Cuadras, albeit a slightly different kind of physicality with Cuadras, where with Gonzalez, it's the high volume, yes, and kind of raw, kind of forward-moving strength, momentum. With Cuadras, it's a lot more in and out, kind of shocking, speedy, explosive, kind of ambushing style, like a Sergio Martinez or Yorkis Gamboa in his prime. And so, that can be very tricky. That can be very tricky to time sometimes. And even though Estrada does have that very good timing, and there is the potential for him to catch Cuadras, particularly, I think, to the, with the kind of that left hook to the body, left hook to the head combination that Estrada loves to throw. Cuadras can also ratchet off some good combinations. And Cuadras actually coming forward, even though that's not necessarily his general kind of approach to the sport of boxing. It tends to be a little bit more mid-range to back foot, in the where he prefers to be fighting at. The Estrada could have some difficulty, and if Estrada does mess up his hands in this fight, like I said before, it could be a long night. And so, like, even as I'm kind of dishing out my analysis of these two and of the matchup, it's very difficult for me to really make a decision as to who I really favor in the fight. Really, I think it's going to ultimately come down to, how they probably look at the weigh-in. And as they walk to the ring, Cuadras, I do think that is definitely the bigger guy versus Estrada. Estrada, you could see that, at 108, the motherfucker was ripped. He was shredded like nobody's business. At 112, the same way. But he's not really a big guy. Like, he's not like a guy that I don't think was like outgrowing 112, and it's like he had to move up to 115 because he was just too heavy to make 112. I think a lot of it is money. I think a lot of the reason why he moved up is because he's chasing Chocolatito. He's chasing the big money, chasing the big fights. He's going to make probably some pretty good bucks here against Cuadras on HBO. And if he manages to beat Cuadras and then beat Gonzalez and fight and beat Inoue, he'll go down into, he'll be plastering himself into true, like, all-time great legendary territory. Modern great level stuff. So I think he's doing it for money and legacy as well. And then with that legacy, with chasing those big names, obviously the money follows. People have been saying that they're only willing to fight Estrada for like $1 million plus, and so you definitely know that he'll be getting paid if he manages to get that rematch with Gonzalez or a mega fight with Naoya Inoue. So it's a big deal for him, and it's also a big deal for Cuadras, because the way that I see it, whoever comes out on top out of all these super flyweights, and even potentially if any of these guys move up to bantamweight, and depending on what happens, I guess, with Luis Neri or even Zlani Tete and some of the other bantamweight high-level fighters, since now it looks like they're even unifying, Ryan Burnett and Zanat Zakianov. There's some pretty good coin to be had for all of these guys. And that's not to even set aside the other champions. Kaya Fai, Jaron Akas, you got Rashid Warren out there plugging away, trying to get that fight with Akas. Yafai can bring a little bit more of the UK audience, which ultimately means more money, more pool for the general fighters as they stand, and it's just going to be really interesting to see how it all turns out. To me, it's like flip of the coin between Estrada and Cuadras, man. It could be Estrada's technical skills that roll the day, or it could be Cuadras' just kind of raw talent, physicality, the speed, the explosiveness, the variability, the ability to improvise that is able to kind of keep him a step ahead of Estrada. It's gonna be a fun one. That's all I can say. The only thing I can predict is that it's gonna be a show stealer. I think it's gonna be the fight of the night. It's the one that frankly I'm looking the most forward to of this night and pretty much of the whole year. This is a fight I've like as soon as it was first announced, I was like, damn, I can't even believe they're actually making this fight happen. And I'm really, really glad. Definitely big props because these are basically the two best guys at the weight class without a belt. That's how I feel about it. Well, I guess you could Towson Gonzalez too. Two of the three best guys at 115 without a belt. And so there's plenty of great matches to be had with all the aforementioned names. So I think that's gonna do it for this one. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.